strong, I guess, affiliation. This is good. This law presentation is new because a lot of things are changing. So it should be good. It should be very illuminating for a lot of folks. Are you guys in general concerned about the job market? You guys are in the top row. Yeah, I mean, I came out of college. It seems like even at finance, there's, I'll talk about it. There's kind of a convergence of 3 or 4 things happening in the legal market, particularly. But I used to work for a big law firm in San Francisco, based out of San Francisco. But it's kind of Morrison Foster's name, big white shoe law firm. I just anecdotally, I heard a lot about associate salaries are static. But also just the numbers that they're bringing in. Just because the market, a lot of things are driving it. Pretty much started last year. Let me apologize for the just there were a couple of competing events. Oh, it's no problem. It's no problem. We got. I think one of the things is I have no problem coming back down here again. So, and in the spring, there's going to be much more kind of demand for this because everybody's kind of thinking, oh, I'm going to have to start getting into it. So, but I'll pass out a few things and we'll get going. All right.
They're both important to the battle. Unfortunately, I guess. And they already played each other. So it's really important for the Colts to win.
And I think that when I hear my best, that's like the best experience.
All right. So is everybody got a piece of pizza ready to go? Good. All right. So how many people here, just a real quick poll, how many 2Ls we got, how many 3Ls we got? So 2Ls first. Okay, 2Ls, more 3Ls it seems like, right? Some 1Ls.
Do you mind if
Sure.
before we get started, if we just do a brief announcement for our
Yeah,
club as well?
absolutely.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Hi. Thank you all for coming. Before we get started, I'd like to briefly mention that the BLS will be hosting its annual ESQ Career Symposium on February 4th and 5th. That's a Friday and Saturday. It's the largest student-run conference of the year, featuring over 30 partners, in-house counsel, and young associates from major firms and companies. It's a great opportunity to network for 1L jobs and 2L OCI, as well as to learn more about a variety of law and business-related jobs. Sign-ups will be in January, so keep an eye out for that, and we hope to see you all there.
All right. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Peter and also Jennifer, who I believe had a competing event, who's not here. But they were able to work with me to coordinate this, so I really appreciate that. There are three handouts that I got kind of moving around, so make sure you get each of them. One is basically a one sheet, and it kind of describes each of these programs. So that's kind of an 8.5 by 11. And then the second thing is my business card. So if you ever have a question regarding your student loan, you can always email me or call me. And then the third one is an information card. And so that looks like this, and I'll reference that later. But if you fill this out, we'll go ahead and do a free kind of assessment on your debt situation. So it gives you kind of basically a roadmap for what you need, what you can do. But first, I want to introduce myself. My name is Mathew Ashley. I'm with GL Advisor. And to give you a little background on GL Advisor, we were founded in 2003. One of our founding members was a Duke undergrad, actually. And so he's actually the chief marketing officer now. He's my boss. But it was founded at Harvard Business School. And really it came out of a project that essentially it looked to kind of see, where the incentives were in the student loan world. And as they kind of looked into it, they realized that there was really nobody who was aligned with the students. I mean, everybody was kind of either aligned with the lender or the financial aid. And so there's nobody really looking at the student and the benefits that the students had. So that's kind of where we started. And we came, and so that's where we're aligned. We're aligned, with the students as opposed to, a particular lender or anything like that. I also want to say that if you have any questions at any time about any of the material, some of it's dense, some of it we'll go through fairly quickly. I'm going to go for about 30 minutes, but if you have any questions at any time, certainly ask me. We'll probably present at about 150 law schools over the next 6-8 months. So this is one of our first presentations, which is great. But the next week I've got GW and William and Mary, and so we're kind of going all over the place. And so you can always ask a question. So the idea is that when you look at the financial life of an individual, you kind of have, the people that you touch, you deal with financial aid, and then maybe 5 years into your career, you have a financial planner, financial advisor. Well, there's nobody in that middle space, and that's kind of where we look at it. And we look at if you can manage your debt well and decrease that overall amount that you would owe using whatever, a government program or some strategic plans, then it's as good as kind of investing, things like that. So there's kind of this net worth concept that we're working on. So without further ado, I'll kind of get going. So we'll talk a little bit about the data that we've looked at, and then we'll also we'll talk about the legislation. So first I'll talk a little bit about the economics of the legal kind of world right now, and then we'll talk about the legislation, which I think is probably the most important for you. So to give you a little bit of framework, and that's what we're doing, we'll establish a little framework. The cost of debt levels, or the debt levels for law students have doubled in the last 7 years. And interestingly, you have kind of three things happening right now that's affecting the legal world. You have debt levels rising. You have kind of you also have an economic downturn, which I'm sure everybody knows about. Pretty much the only thing that is in the news these days. And then the other big thing is that you have a little bit of a supply-demand imbalance in the legal world, which I'm sure you guys are aware of as well. One of the things that we've seen in our analysis was that basically the law degree, you kind of have a bimodal kind of salary dispersion. The mean is about 85,000, but you have a lot in the 60,000, 50,000, 60,000 range, and then you have some in that kind of 160,000 range. And it basically depends on what kind of a career track you have. And so we'll talk about all the different career tracks. And one of the things that I'll do, I don't want you to despair, because I'm sure you've heard all the doom and gloom scenarios out there. I don't want you to despair, because what these programs that I'll talk about do is they increase the value of your degree by decreasing the overall amount of debt. And that's really what they're all about. So we'll talk about that. All right. Here's another bimodal distribution. This one's from the NLAP, or NALP, the Law Placement Association. And this is actually, this is people who are further in their careers as well. So it kind of just shows you that even, people coming right out are bimodal, and also people further into their careers. This was also done in 2006, so it's kind of pre-financial downturn. And so you kind of see that there's a little bit of a trend there. For comparison, you have kind of a single mode for the MBA grads, which is about 87, just to kind of give you a perspective. One of the things that we saw is that though the average debt level is about $109,000 for a law student, probably a little more for you guys, right? You guys, it's not really based on where you're at or anything like that, but I've just found that in general, we have an average of about 109, but I see that it's everywhere I've been, it's been quite a bit more in some cases. What's a typical, if you don't mind me doing a poll, what's a typical kind of expected kind of debt load that you guys would have coming out of here? Just throw out a number. 120? Okay, so 120 is reasonable. The good thing is that the higher your debt load, the more forgiveness you'll actually have. And so whenever we look at our models, it'll be basically, if you have a certain amount forgiven based on $109,000 in debt, then the forgiveness will be higher on $120,000 in debt. So in that case, it's kind of a good. So here's a couple of the articles that are out there: Wall Street Journal, New York Times. Anybody, is this one of those things that you guys talk about in the halls, that kind of thing, about the kids who are on hunger strike and that kind of thing, or is it something that's a little less? I'm just curious. Okay, so we'll talk about three basic tracks. Large firm, which is kind of your corporate, product liability, bankruptcy, small firm. That even includes kind of a solo practice, and then we'll look at kind of the nonprofit sector. Now, each of these, they kind of have a different strategy you would employ in using a couple of these different programs. And so that's why we kind of separate it out that way. But based on our analysis, we've got some of these are the different salaries. Nonprofit coming out, that's if you're working for, government entity or something like that, it's about 45, small firm 65, large firm 115. I'll give you a little background. I came from, prior to doing this, I went to grad school at the University of Notre Dame from a large white shoe law firm in San Francisco. And just anecdotally, they are, there's a couple of different ways that they're kind of controlling the costs right now. I think typically it was about 160 coming in for associate salaries. But what they've done is instead of lowering the salary, they just hire less, or they just hire a lot more temporary lawyers and that kind of thing. So, you don't have benefits and things like that. And so that's kind of what we're seeing in there. But this is basically an average. So hopefully this will kind of give us a platform to talk about it. And here's our $109,000 in loan. We're going to use that assumption all the way throughout. So no matter what. To kind of give you an example, for a small firm, this is kind of what the cash flows looks like. So we've done some very intricate modeling to kind of look at the savings. And it's really just more for an object lesson. Didn't really need to reference it. But if you go through all these programs, and we'll get into some of the examples, you'll be able to save about $75,000 on average. That's over a kind of a 10-year period. But depending on where your salary level is, using one or both or all these programs together, you'll be able to increase the value of basically your base salary. Okay, so we'll cover some of the legislation. We'll cover in-school consolidation, which is definitely very important to you. And then we'll talk about kind of an action plan, things that you would need to kind of consider when you're looking at it. Okay, so let's talk about legislation. So everything was kind of comes from the Higher Education Act that was established in 1965 through the Great Society and Lyndon Johnson. But the things that really apply to you are two programs that came out in 07 and 09 respectively. You have income-based repayment. Has anybody here heard of income-based repayment? You know about it? Well, that's good that we actually have a lot more knowledge out there. And then there's another one, lesser known, came out last year called, public service loan forgiveness. And those two things, when used in conjunction, can really be very valuable. And then recently, SAFRA, they improved the IBR formula. We'll talk about the tenets of IBR, but they actually improved it, and so it's actually more valuable. So you're seeing that there's a really big demand to kind of lower the overall cost of education, or at least control it. All right, any question? Okay, so income-based repayment is basically, it's got three components. It's got a forgiveness component. It's got a component that limits your monthly payment. Right now it's 15%. That improvement that I talked about, it's actually going to improve it to a 10%, meaning you'll only pay 10% of your discretionary income when you come out for IBR. And we'll get into a couple models, so hopefully it illustrates a little more. And then the loan forgiveness component is if you're in the public sector, it's 10. That's the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. And then if you're in private, it's about 20 years. And the reason it's about 20 years is because in 2014, it's going to move to 20 years, but right now it's 25 years. And so, if you're a third year, you're looking at 23 years. If you're second year, 22 years. And so it's kind of in that range, but it's improved. How many people, by the way, just a kind of quick poll, how many people are going to public service or think they're kind of going in that route? Okay, so a few. Yeah, I think typically it's like, maybe 10 to 20%, I think, of most schools. All right. So this is what the model looks like. If you extend out your loan to a 20-year payment, then you'll be paying $865. However, if you move it into IBR and you get into that program, you'll end up paying very little at the beginning because you're coming out and it's set to your AGI or your adjusted gross income. And then as you move up, you'll be paying less. But ultimately, you'll pay significantly less than you would if you paid under normal circumstances. Also, to give you kind